just by show of hands, and I won't take offense, so be honest, who's hearing of me for the first time today, just by show of hands? You don't know me from a hole in the wall, so a good 70, 80%. Who has heard of me before or come to one of my events or something that I've done? I'll take it, a good 20%. Just so I know how much time to spend on the pre-spiel and the context. Firstly, please add me on Instagram. I do reply to all of my DMs, whoever I can help. I'd be very happy to do that. Now, my friend here, should we start with the good news or the bad news? Good news, we'll start with the good news. Okay, good news is, really had a lot of stuff going on, to be quite honest, as we approach 2020. And let me just compare and contrast what I was doing and then what impact 2020 had. So firstly, creative content agency. You might recognize Lewis Howes. It's one of the many different people that we've shot in our agency. Effectively, what we do is we plan, produce, publish, and promote content. And we've worked with some of the best business leaders in the UAE, and we've worked with some of the most well-known celebrities in the world across hip-hop music and thought leadership and business. And in many cases, we take folks like this gentleman in the middle here, Spencer Lodge. We take them from business people and business leaders, and we turn them into thought leaders by following this program, which is a program that we've come up with over the last, I've been in business 24 years, 16 years legally, so that's kind of what we do. Now, what's the downside with this? Well, the downside with this is that once March 2020 hit, our revenue went down 85%, which isn't ideal when you've got a team of 7 that are all salaried. At that time as well, all of those people around that month were visiting their home countries. Well, 5 of them were, and eventually ended up having to either leave or resign because they were locked down and we were not set up to work remotely. What was the first fuck-up? The first fuck-up was that if you look at plan, produce, publish, and promote, too much of our revenue was coming from produce, which meant that we had to physically go on location, like the first image you saw there, and shoot somebody with the camera. And if we're not allowed to be close to each other, and we can't mic people up, and we can't go to their offices or their locations with cameras because we're locked down at home, then that was the first mistake, is that I built a business that was over-indexed or too top-heavy on produce. Not a problem. Let's move on to some of the other things I was doing. Next up, My Friends, Your Friends. Who's heard of it by raise of hands? Wow, so more people have heard of My Friends, Your Friends than have actually heard of me. That's a big achievement. I'll take that. My Friends, Your Friends started off in 2017 with 12 people meeting in a bar in Dubai. Fast forward 5 years, and those people continue to invite their friends, and every single event we'd go to a different venue, we'd have different co-hosts. We went up to 4,000 people. This is a quick screen grab of our event at Burj Khalifa, 500 people in there, another 100 people outside. Downside though, no more events. Pretty clear come March 2020 that they were like, this whole thing about go along to Raj's events and talk to whoever you want to talk to, because it's like being in my kitchen at a house party. You can just talk to whoever you want. But the magic of being able to be close proximity to someone had absolutely gone whilst we figured out what this bug was that was jumping from person to person. So this is My Friends, Your Friends down, no more events. Okay, no problem at all. I'm an international DJ. I'll just continue to play music to people. I think you're picking up on a trend here. Unfortunately, no more dancing. Even when the option was there to DJ, a lot of DJs didn't actually want to go back to DJing because they were DJing and they used to DJing big party records. But was anybody in restaurants and bars at that time? You were not allowed to stand up from your table unless you were going to the washroom. Right, exactly. And you had to put your mask on. So I was like, okay, well, this is not the DJ culture that I was raised on. I'm not going to be able to do this anymore. What else is going on? Well, I have a whole bunch of international projects. I was flying all over the world, coming up with these ideas and rolling them out. One of the most popular ones, I would say, is an event I came up with called Vayner World. Anybody heard of Gary Vaynerchuk by raise of hands? A good amount of people as well, a third of the room. So I launched 2 of his books in London, Jab, 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 Right Hook, and the Ask Gary V show. We did the first ever international Ask Gary V show. But international projects, can I just go and escape and go and do more international projects if everything's locked down over here? No, because there's no more flying. So, for the first time in a in 40 years and a 22-year career of hustling and doing business, and let's be pretty honest about this, been pretty fucking successful my whole life, to be honest. Like, there's not been any bad years. We've just continued to just plow on and kill it because it's just in my DNA. It's not like, I'd like to say to you that like I've had lows. I really haven't. In my mind, I'm just such a fucking goat that I'm just never gonna lose. So at this point, what has happened though is I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm just out of options. And so I'm like, what to do? And the number one thing that I thought to myself at this point, and I've never ever shared this publicly, I've only ever told one person, which is my business partner. When I was sat, there was a period of time when we were sat in our apartments, do you remember? And you had to send an SMS to even go to the store to buy groceries. Anybody who was in Dubai at that time. That was for me peak lockdown. That's when you knew that, hang on, things are really getting real. And because I've got such a massive fucking ego, I thought to myself, how do I want to be remembered during this time? Like, because I know that at some point, God willing, we're going to come out of it. And at some point, I'm going to come and give this talk to you guys. And I thought to myself, what do I want my legacy to be during this time as to how I approached it? And this is my first tip, is mentality. At any individual point when you're challenged, if the operating system in your brain isn't able to start at least, even if you have to squint your eyes and it's not the truth, if you're not at least able to look at the cup as half full, it's going to be a struggle. Because once you admit that the cards are stacked against you, you're coming off the back foot. And it's really about changing that perception and bumping up what's good for you. What was good for me? Okay, as you can see clearly, between the DJing, the gigs, the international projects, I'm a people person. I get massive energy from just being close to people and talking and jamming and hugging and taking selfies and all that good stuff that I've been doing for over 20 years across my businesses and brands. But then I had to look at it, I was like, okay, all I've got is the four walls that I'm locked inside of. But these four walls aren't too bad. And there's food in the fridge and the water's running hot. And I had to go to that absolute baseline to be like, okay, this is the new 51%, everything is okay. I've now passed the halfway mark, and yes, there's no revenue coming in, and yes, I'm not able to hang out with my friends and see my friends and family. All that's moving against me, but what I can see around me in these four walls is a blessing enough. And of course, we all know that there are some people that didn't even have that as well. So I had to make that the new normal. In my mind, I was like, what I have is enough, and it's enough to start with. Number two, what do you add in? Resources. And this is where it started to get really interesting, because all of the projects that I'd been involved in, all of the brands that had yielded pretty well for me, I had to start looking and saying, okay, what resources do I have access to? And if there's one thing I will forever be grateful to the UAE for, is that they opened up Zoom. And all of us who did not have access to video calling now had access to video calling. And it was at this point that I realized that, hang on a second, normally my business operates and generates revenue from the part of Dubai that matters, which quite frankly is like the airport to marina. That's the hot zone of where all the money is. And now, because we have four elements of what we do, plan, produce, publish, promote, even though I can't produce, planning is actually where all the profit margin is. Because when you're doing strategy work, there's no inherent cost. There's no cameras, batteries, transport, tripods, etc. And if planning can be conveyed just through speaking, then I don't have to do all my strategy work in boardrooms up and down Dubai. I can now jump on Zoom and sell this strategy work and solve problems in Manchester, Miami, Manila, Moscow, maybe not Moscow anymore, but like, you know, you kind of get my point. So it was a case of looking at all the resources. And at that point, once the mentality hit the resources, something very special happened, because that is when we got to our outcome. So this is how specifically we pivoted. Number one, I'm a hardcore hip hop guy. I came up DJing since 1998. And as I ran my career, and I've been involved in, you know, working with some companies that have sold for many millions of dollars, and there's other places where I put like a sweat equity deal in. I put my time in, then I've exited and made some money on that way. But at my absolute core, I'm a hip hop kid. Is there anybody who's over 35 years old, just by raise of hands? Okay, good. Have you ever heard of the Sugar Hill Gang? Everyone knows that song? The hip hop, the hibbit to the hip hop. These guys reached out to me after a chance encounter that I met with them 10 years earlier in London. They were going to do a show. They were doing their sound check. They didn't have time to go back to the hotel. They asked us, where can we get t-shirts? We were there to interview them for our vlog. We were quite early in the days of YouTube interviewing rappers and hip hop stars, everyone from Sugar Hill Gang to rolling around with Bloods and Crips in LA and Kendrick Lamar in 2009. And we said, listen, you're gonna go from doing 50 to 150 shows a year. Same with Fat Man Scoop, same with Crazy Drazy from Daz FX. We started doing interviews. Fat Man Scoop was doing interviews on Instagram, doing collabs. We'd take that audio, turn it into a podcast. Sugar Hill Gang, well, which rapper is not gonna wanna talk to the guys who put out effectively the first ever rap song? Everybody's gonna go and wanna pay homage to those guys. So we did about 100 episodes with Fat Man Scoop, including DMX, rest in peace, Missy Elliott, Timbaland, all these other people. Sugar Hill Gang, incredible artists as well. Crazy Drazy produces podcasts, and a few others as well. Now, from a financial point of view, here's how you hustle it. We do not have a marketing budget for traditional marketing. I take all of the money that I would put in marketing, or especially in Dubai, all of the money that you'd waste in marketing by greasing people's palms so they can write articles about you in all of these famous .coms, right? We know the ones, right? Some begin with F and end with orbs. Some start with and end with preneur. These are all, if we're being really honest about it, you can buy your way into these magazines if you know how to hustle them by writing guest slots and stuff like that. So when someone says, I'm 30 under 30 on Forbes, I'm like, F off, that doesn't mean anything, right? Now, what I did is I take my marketing budget and I just give it to the people. My friends, your friends, if anyone's ever been to that, not a single person in 14 events and 4,000 registered attendees has ever paid a penny to get in. I sponsor all that. That's where I take my marketing budget. But I couldn't spend it then because no more my friends, your friends. So I put my marketing budget behind these celebrities. And then we use that to build relationships, at least 150, 160 high-level US-based celebrity relationships, which still to this day we've done nothing with. Next, by watching them do their podcasts, and I've had a few podcasts that I've been part of, celebrity podcasts, I started my own, the Raj Kateja Show, because there was so many things going on in the news, new news that was happening day in, day out, that I was like, as a highly paid consultant, my whole thing is just to have a position on something. So this is what's happening in US politics, macroeconomics, travel, hospitality, food and beverage. I need to have a position on it because that's what my clients ask me to do in the real world. So the original podcast was going to be called Raj Kateja's Favorite Positions. And then I thought, I'm still living in Dubai, we'll just put, what might be a good idea to pull out, okay? So what I did is, pulled out of Raj Kateja's Favorite Positions, went with the Raj Kateja Show, which, if it did nothing else, it allowed me to become more comfortable with my voice because for many years, I'd become so consumed by being behind the camera and shooting celebrities and shooting my clients that I actually forgot how I sounded on camera. So by getting this show out, it really helped with that. If you're on Spotify, iTunes, etc., YouTube, go and grab that show. And then, and this is the icing on the cake, Creative Content Agency, my business, which I registered in 2006 to help Russell Peters with a project when he was still doing 1,200 seats in those days. We changed it, or we added Creative Content Agency, we now added Academy. Now, taking all of the strategies that we've used to work with not only people in Dubai, but international celebrities, artists, unknowns, butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, we've put that into a syllabus, which is how do you plan, produce, publish, and promote content. Instead of selling it in person for anywhere between 15 and 95,000 dirhams to teach it one-on-one, for $1,200 in the next couple of months, folks will be able to download the course materials, study them, and then get one-on-one coaching time with us. Because I realized during COVID that this was vulnerable, produce, we need to move it to plan, and we need to use technology and Zoom and Stripe and all these incredible things that have come into the UAE since then to leverage and distribute that. So that's another thing that happened. Closing point. It's not what you might think, guys. I think I've got about a minute left. The reason why I wanted to make this point to you today is because whilst 2020 to now has been very challenging. I would urge you, please, if you learn nothing else today, prepare for harder times. If you look at what's happening with global conflicts, if you look at what's happening with inflation, food costs, travel, fuel, it's actually going to make the last 2 years, plus 2008 global financial crisis, plus the dot-com burst of April 2000, it's going to make all of those look like a trip to Disneyland. Times are about to get harder. My closing point here is take that blueprint, DM me, ask me for help, because I'm going to sail it through this recession as well. I'm just telling you, and it kind of sounds a bit of an arsehole thing to say. This is my third 3.5 recession, I would say, that I'm going to go through as a grown adult, and I've got no fear about it at all. But a lot of it, again, is mentality and resources. And if that's something that needs a bit of a twist or a bit of an upgrade, I'm here for you. Thanks very much.